It's that time of year where the Imsa Championship really starts to come into focus. The favorites have established themselves, meanwhile others will be throwing Hail Marys to try and claw back into it. And with only 3 races left for the prototype classes, the GTD classes have 4, every single race means that much more, and what better time to talk about the championship battles as we head into the home stretch. First, before we start talking about all these championship points situations, let's give you a little refresher on how the Imsa points system works. At the end of each race, championship points are awarded to each car that finishes the race. And actually, since there's no minimum percentage of the race that needs to be completed in order for you to earn championship points, as long as you start the race, you get points. Finishing first place in the race will get you 350 points, second place 320, third place 300 points, fourth place 280, and fifth place 260. For each position after fifth place, it decreases in increments of 10 points. Qualifying points are also awarded, and they are at a rate of 10% of what those race points are. That means the pole sitter gets 35 points, second place gets 32, third place 30, and so on. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the GTP Championship points, and as always, these points are presented by P1 Web Development. If you're looking for a custom website, then look no further than P1 Web Development. They've been a huge supporter of the show this year, so go and check them out at the first link in the description or by heading to p1webdevelopment.com. The race is very much alive in the GTP ranks, with the number 7 Porsche Penske Motorsports 963 leading the way with 2,044 points. They lead the 01 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac by 93 points, the 6 Porsche Penske Motorsports 963 by 132 points, and the number 40 Wayne Taylor Racing Acura by 199 points. Rounding out the top 5, one of the cars that was really strong earlier in the season, that's the number 31 Whelen Engineering Cadillac. So as we can see from that, Porsche has a pretty healthy lead here. 93 points is nothing to scoff at by any means. And when we look at the potential point swing on any given weekend, you know, the difference between first place and getting pole position to starting last place and finishing last place, the difference here for the GTP classes is 154 points. So that's a pretty good gauge for us to look at these championship standings from. Essentially, right now, if the 7 were to start last and finish last, then they'd only be able to be overtaken by the number 6 or the 01. With the 40 being outside of that sort of magic 154 point mark, it means that the number 7 has a pretty comfortable points lead on everybody except for 2 entries. Now this is something important to keep in mind, but something else to keep in mind is simply who's hot and who's not right now. At the end of the day, momentum, when it's coming down to the most important time in the season, can be critical, and the number 7 also has that going their way. I'd firmly classify the number 7 in the hot category. So far this season, they've only had 1 finish off of the podium throughout the races. This has led to them having this healthy lead in the championship points. Now, does this mean they aren't going to have a poor race from here on out? Absolutely not. They still have to execute like they have from the drop of the green flag this year. However, if they keep this up, they are going to be very difficult to beat come the end of the season. Also firmly in the hot category here is their sister number 6 Porsche. While they're sitting 3rd in the standings, they have a 1st, 2nd, and a 3rd in their last 3 races, and have firmly moved into the championship hunt, especially if the number 7 were ever to slip up. On the flip side, turning it over to the not so hot, or I guess in this case that would be the cold, here we find the number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac. You remember the tear that they went on at the start of the season, right? They finished 2nd in 3 of the first 4 races. However, since then they've backed that up with a 6th place and an 8th place. That has dropped them down to 5th in the championship standings, and it's gonna be a hard hill to climb if they want to get back into the hunt. Not all is lost though. If they can rediscover that speed that they had earlier in the season, then they absolutely could do it, but it is going to take some work. Also in the cold category, I have the number 85 JDC Miller Motorsports Porsche. Now, the privateer efforts do have a little bit more of a difficult time than some of their factory counterparts, but last year's impressive run late in the season, where they finished in the top 5 of 4 of the 6 races that they ran, was very impressive, and I think it led to high hopes for this year. That better 2024 season has not yet come to fruition though. As it's turned out, they've actually failed to finish in the top half of the GTP rankings in any races so far this year. However, with that being said, do not rule them out. This is their second time coming to a lot of these tracks now. They're going to have some data to look back on, and they're bound to put things together with a good run at some point or another. Keep an eye on the 85 and see if they can finish off the season strong. Taking a look now at the LMP2 championship standings, and here you'll recall just a couple of races ago, it seemed like a runaway for the number 18 Era Motorsports entry. Mind you, it was only 2 races into the year, but after a couple of less than ideal runs, I think you could call it, at Watkins Glen and at CTMP, they find themselves now in 3rd in the championship standings. Leading the way there, though, is the number 74 Riley Motorsports entry with 1,308 points. They have a narrow 12-point lead over last round's winners, the number 52 Inter Europol by PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry. 135 points back the lead is the 18 Era Motorsports entry. The number 22 United Autosports entry is 4th, 166 points back, and the number 11 TDS Racing entry rounds out the top 5, 183 points off the lead. Now you'll recall I talked about the point swing difference in the GTP class. Here in the LMP2 class, it's a little bit larger at 176 points. There's more entries on the grid generally in the LMP2 class. So based off of a 12 entry LMP2 class, the difference between first and last in those points is 176 points. With that in mind, and taking a look at the standings once again, we can see that the top 4 are within 176 points of the leader. And even still, 5th place is also very much in the running. However, the clear battle here exists between the top 2 entries, the number 74 Riley entry and number 52 Inter Europol by PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry. They seem to have emerged as the championship favorites. That's an excellent way to transition into who is hot in this class, and the first one to talk about is the number 74 Riley entry. They finished 2nd in back-to-back races. They have 3 podiums in the first 4 races of the season, and that's what has them at the top of the points. It's really difficult to top that when you've been seeing consistent results that Riley's been putting down. However, then we also have the 52 Inter Europol by PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry firmly in this hot category as well. They finished 3rd and 1st in their past 2 races to vault themselves up the point standings and get to within 12 points of the 74. It seems like we're in for a great battle here, and also you can't count out some of the other entries in 3rd, 4th, and 5th, but they're really going to have a good run here at Road America to set them up for their final 2 races of the season. A couple of cars that are pretty ice cold right now that you perhaps would expect to be up there in the championship standings. One of them is the 04 CrowdStrike Racing entry. This is a car that you expect to compete for the championship right from the drop of the green flag in January. But this year, they just haven't really found their stride. They came out of the gate strong at Daytona with a 2nd place finish, but since then they've backed that up with a 9th place, a 13th place, and a 7th place finish. And with recent developments with CrowdStrike and some of the issues that they have had recently, it's actually caused that 04 to withdraw themselves from the upcoming race at Road America, effectively eliminating them from any sort of championship contention. That being said though, if they do find themselves on the grid for their remaining races this season, I fully expect them to be right in the hunt for the win. This is a professional team, great drivers behind it. You cannot rule them out, even if they're not in the championship fight. Another team that's ice cold is the 99 AO Racing entry. Unfortunately, Spike has just not been able to find it in a race this year. This is a team that has qualified on pole in 3 straight races, but despite that, they do not have a finish better than 7th this year. Clearly they have the pace to do well, but they just haven't had anything go their way. This is another team that you gotta think, if things go their way, they're gonna be in contention for a race win, but it just might be too late in the season to find themselves in a championship fight. Now it can be difficult to stay on top of all of the news from around the world of Imsa. That's why I have yet another way for you to stay in the loop. The S's is an email newsletter curated by me with all the biggest Imsa news and analysis that you need to know. I bring together the best articles, videos that I think you should check out, and more, and put it all together in a quick and easy 5-minute read. In addition to this, I give you my thoughts on everything that's going on, as well as what to watch out for in upcoming races. You can subscribe to the S's by clicking the link below or heading to offinthes.com. Back to the championship standings now, and in GTD Pro, it is the number 77 again, AO Racing Porsche leading the way, but could we see a couple of other perennial championship contenders force their way into the mix? Here, Rexy leads the way with 1,955 points. That's 98 points ahead of the 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin. Right, that's a fairly comfortable lead. The number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus is in third, 120 points back. The number 3 Corvette by Pratt Miller Motorsports is 181 points back, and rounding out the top 5 is the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW, who are 276 points back. Again, the point swing here for one of the Sprint Cup races should be about 154 points, so that means the top 3 are within that realistic striking distance. However though, there are 4 races to go for the GTD class. There's one more race than we have for the prototypes, so this is where I think things could get interesting. And it all begins with the hot teams, starting off with Corvette. And this is just Corvette racing in general. They had a strong run at Watkins Glen, and honestly, they were going to be on for the win there if they had not had to pit on the final lap of the race, essentially, and give that win to the 23 Heart of Racing. However, though, they still came away from Watkins Glen with a podium, as the sister car was able to finish third, but they brought that momentum and carried it forward, where they absolutely dominated the GTD Pro field, getting first and third in qualifying, and backing that up with a dominant race effort where they led every lap except for 4 en route to a 1-2 finish. I know it's only been 2 races, but this is a very promising development from Corvette, and I do think that even though they're 181 points off of Rexy, they definitely could take a stab at the championship if they can keep this pace up. Speaking of hot cars though, and Rexy, the number 77 AO Racing, you gotta talk about them in this class as well. So far this season, they have 2 wins, they have a second, and they have a third last round out at CTMP. A race in which that they didn't honestly show that strong a pace. And if this is how they're turning up week in and week out, they're going to be very difficult to beat in the final 4 races. Something that is worth keeping in mind, though, is Seb Prio is taking a step back from the team, and for the next round at Road America, Julian Andlauer is going to be stepping in. Not a bad replacement by any stretch of the imagination, but it is worth noting and monitoring how Rexy gets on, with a new co-driver being brought on. On the not-so-hot side of things, we find the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW. Carrying over from their dominant GTD run last year, Paul Miller Racing, you kind of expected them to be up in the fight in the GTD Pro class. They opened the season with a strong podium run at the Rolex 24, but back-to-back 8th place finishes has really dropped them out of contention. Currently, they find themselves 276 points back, and they're going to have to go on a heck of a hot streak to close out the year if they want to claw their way back into the championship. The other ice-cold entry here is the number 65 Ford Mustang. The last 2 rounds, the number 64 sister Ford Multimatic Motorsports entry has seemed to have found some pace, finishing in 4th and 5th. However, the same strong runs can't be said for the 65 entry. They find themselves with a best finish on the season of 6th, and in these final 4 races, you gotta think that they're just gonna be looking to build on each race, find some more pace in the car, and hopefully learn some things that they can apply to the 2025 season. And then we have the GTD standings. Here, it's kind of a runaway, with the number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes at 2,090 points. That is a 340-point lead on the number 96 Turner Motorsports BMW. The 32 Korthoff Motorsports Mercedes is 569 points back, the 34 Conquest Racing Ferrari 582 points back, and the number 12 Vassar Sullivan Lexus is 635 points back. If you're asking about the point swing here, well, in the GTD class, it is the largest of any of the classes, and this is the point swing for the upcoming race at Road America. At the Michelin Endurance Cup events, this is going to be larger. There's going to be about 7 more entries on the grid that we'd be expecting for those, so the point swing would be larger for those. But for this next race at Road America, it sits at 209 points. 209 points. That means if the 57 Windward Racing Mercedes were to just enter the next 2 races and finish dead last, there's a reasonable chance that they would still hold the points lead. With that, they are clearly on the hot list here. There's not really much else that we have to say for it. They've had just a single finish off of the podium through the first 6 races of the season, and to go along with that, they have 4 wins. It's pretty hard to back that up in the hot category, but the number 96 Turner Motorsports BMW has had a strong run as well. After a disappointing Rolex 24, they've gone on a roll with a couple of second place finishes, and no finish worse than 6th. That's a very respectable run, and if you were to completely take out Windward Racing from the picture here, they would have a sizable lead over then P2 in the championship, the Korthoff Racing Mercedes. However, when you got a team like Windward who has been dominant like they have this year, it's going to be pretty difficult to keep up. On the cold side of things, number 78 Forte Racing Lamborghini has only had 1 finish, better than 8th place all season, and that's really not what I expected from this team. They finished the season strong with a 2nd place finish at Petit Le Mans last year, which I thought was going to set them up nicely for this year. Not only that, they showed a lot of good pace throughout last season. However, that car has been severely impacted by BOP this year. I think that's probably brought them down a notch. And while they have had some okay runs so far this year, I do think that we could be looking at them to improve significantly here in the final few races of the season, where again they finished strong last year. Another cold team is another one of those Ford Mustangs. Number 55 Proton Entry picked up a 5th and a 7th on the West Coast swing, which is pretty respectable all things considered in the GTD class, but other than that, it's been an abysmal season for this car. Mechanical issues and crashes in many of the races this year have really plagued them. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. The Mustangs, as I said, it looks like they're starting to get their pace. They're starting to find something, and I do expect that this car could put together some strong runs here in the closing races. And then finally, we have the championships that I know I'm pretty guilty of not talking much about, and that's our 2 Bronze Cup awards. The first one being the Jim Truman Award, which is awarded to the top bronze-rated driver in the LMP2 class at the end of the season. It's important to note that only race points are factored into this one. So here, as you would expect, Gar Robinson leads the way over Nick Bruhl. Those are the drivers in the number 74 and 52 entries, and they're separated by just 20 points. Stephen Thomas, Dan Goldberg, and Ben Keating round out the top 5 here, but it really does look like a 2-horse race between Gar and Nick. The other award is the Bob Aiken Award, and that's awarded once again to the top bronze-rated driver in the GTD class. Points are only awarded for race finishes here, and since the GTD class does not mandate a bronze driver like the LMP2 class does, there are much fewer drivers that are competing full-time for this championship. It also means that there still is a race within a race just amongst these bronze drivers for who's going to finish on the podium in this class. Essentially, you could finish 6th in the GTD ranks, but if you're the top bronze driver, then you're going to get the full 350 points for winning that bronze class. That means that here, Ore Fadani leads the way with 1,760 points. Sheena Monk is in 2nd place with 1,710, so a 50-point gap there. And then in 3rd place is Brandon Aribe with 1,690 points. Those are the only full season drivers here, so the point swing that we're going to see at the upcoming race at Road America is going to be pretty minimal, but considering that we could see 7 or potentially 8 additional bronze drivers on the grid for Indianapolis and Petit Le Mans, that's where we're going to see the biggest swings take place, and that's where this championship is going to be decided. These bronze cups are no joke. The winners of these get an automatic invite to the following year's 24 Hours of Le Mans. So you better believe that these drivers are doing everything in their power to finish ahead of each other on track. Definitely worth keeping an eye out for in the remaining races this year. Now, in addition to these championship hunts, there's plenty of news coming out right now about new manufacturers that are looking to jump into the sport. I discussed 3 manufacturers that are potentially looking to build an LMDH car right here. A huge shout out to all the channel supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offintheesses or click that join button below. Once again though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.